It was the kind of evening where even the stars seemed to pause and watch. The gala was in full swing, satin gowns sweeping marble floors, laughter clinking against crystal glasses, and the city's elite exchanging practiced smiles beneath chandeliers worth more than most homes. At table 7, the most coveted spot in the room, a single chair sat empty. That chair was supposed to belong to Amelia Rhodes. She wasn't late. She had never been invited. Across the ballroom, Ezra Rhodes, CEO of Rhodes Tech Innovations, posed for cameras, flashing his signature smile, the one that had graced business magazines and earned him headlines like Silicon Valley's sharpest mind. On his arm was a woman half his age, wearing a sliver of a dress and a rehearsed look of adoration. Reporters snapped away, calling her name like she was the star of the evening. Amelia watched the live stream alone from a quiet corner of her modest living room, in the same home she and Ezra had once built together. 15 years. 15 years of quiet sacrifices, of unseen battles fought so Ezra could win his. She had been there when his hands shook, before his first investor pitch, when his code failed at 3 a.m., when they couldn't afford both groceries and rent in their early days. While he built a company, she held together a life. She wasn't just his wife. She was the reason he could even begin to chase a dream. But tonight, she had been erased. Amelia's phone buzzed on the coffee table. A friend had sent another article link. She didn't need to open it. She knew what it would show. Ezra beaming. Headlines calling the woman beside him a mystery new muse, congratulating him for turning a new page. He hadn't even told her he was attending. The last conversation they'd had that morning was about dry cleaning and frozen chicken. The betrayal wasn't in the glamour. It was in the silence. Ezra had stopped mentioning her months ago at meetings. She wasn't listed as co-founder on anything, though the business plan on which the entire company was built had been typed on her laptop. On their couch, late one night, while he paced in doubt, and she told him he could do this. Now, her name was nowhere, as if she had never existed. She tried to hold back tears, but they came anyway, not loud, not messy, just slow, steady, like a faucet left dripping in the dark. Outside, the sky was gentle with rain. Inside, Amelia stared at the empty teacup on her table. She didn't feel anger, not yet, not even heartbreak. What she felt most deeply was absence, the hollow realization that somewhere along the way, she had stopped existing in his story. But something inside her stirred that night, not rage, but resolve, not revenge, but the need to reclaim her voice. This wasn't going to be the end of her story, because while Ezra might have written her out of the spotlight, he had forgotten one thing: Amelia had built the foundation, and when the walls come crashing down, only the foundation remains. And tomorrow, for the first time in years, she would stop waiting to be acknowledged, and start making sure she could never be ignored again. She just didn't know yet that everything was about to change, not just for her, but for everyone who ever believed being silent was the same as being weak. The morning after the gala, the city was buzzing with headlines and but in a quiet corner of Eastbridge, Amelia Rhodes stood alone in her small kitchen, stirring coffee she had no intention of drinking. The air outside was foggy, but inside her chest, something had begun to clear. For the first time in years, she felt awake, not from caffeine, but from truth. She slid her phone across the counter and opened an old folder, buried deep in her files. Rhodes Tech, early drafts. There it was, the original pitch, decked by her, refined by her, and presented by Ezra. She still remembered how his voice cracked on slide 5, and how she'd jumped in from the back of the room to field questions that had stumped him. That day changed everything. Investors saw promise, but what they didn't see, what no one ever saw, was the woman behind the screen. Now, the world was calling Ezra a genius, a visionary, a pioneer. They didn't know that the first client had come because Amelia had reached out to her college roommate, or that the original code name for the company, AIR, was a mix of their initials, Amelia Elise Rhodes. Over time, her name vanished from the company deck. Her suggestions stopped being welcomed in meetings. She was told she was too emotional, too soft, not executive material. But last night was different. He hadn't just excluded her. He had publicly replaced her. That pain could have shattered her, but instead, it carved something new. Amelia sat at the small desk tucked beside her bookshelf. She took a deep breath and opened a blank document. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't writing for him. She was writing for herself, to whom it may concern. She typed, "My name is Amelia Rhodes. I am the co-architect of what you now know as Roadstack. I've stayed silent for years, but silence is no longer an option. This is my story. She wrote for hours, pouring out every piece of herself that had been hidden, buried, diminished, not with bitterness but with clarity. She laid out emails, messages, dated documents that proved her role, her input, her voice. She didn't ask for pity. She presented the truth. By nightfall, her fingertips were sore, but her eyes were sharp. She reached out to a journalist she trusted, someone who had once tried to interview her during Roadstack's early days, but was told by Ezra's team that Amelia didn't handle press. This time, she sent the email herself. She expected hesitation. Instead, the journalist called her within 20 minutes. I always knew there was more to that story. The voice on the other end said, "If you're ready to talk, I'm ready to listen." Amelia smiled. Not a smile of triumph, a smile of release that she had spent years being careful, not rocking the boat, letting Ezra shine while she dimmed her own light for the sake of the team, the marriage, the image. But there comes a moment when staying silent hurts more than speaking up. The article went live the next day. It didn't accuse, it revealed. It didn't attack. It unfolded, and it started with a single chilling sentence. While Ezra Rhodes dazzled the city last night, his wife of 15 years watched from a couch built on dreams they once shared, and now she's done watching. Within hours, it spread like wildfire, not just because it was unexpected, but because it was true. What Amelia didn't know yet was that this wasn't just going to shake Ezra's carefully constructed image. It was going to unravel it, and she quite forgotten. Amelia was about to become the voice of everyone who had ever been written out of their own success story. The world didn't just read Amelia's story, it devoured it. By the next morning, news anchors were quoting her words on live television. Podcasts dissected every line of the article. Comments flooded in from women, men, partners, creatives, dreamers, people who had stood in the background while someone else took the spotlight. They helped build, but the most deafening reaction came not from the public. It came from Ezra. He hadn't expected her to fight back, not because he thought she was weak, but because he'd grown used to her silence. In his mind, she had made peace with her position in the shadows. She didn't complain when her name was taken off the company bio. She didn't argue when he stopped inviting her to public events. She didn't even question it when he began traveling alone. But she had been paying attention, and now, so was everyone else. Ezra called her that afternoon. She let it go to voicemail. He called again, and again. Then the texts came, carefully crafted, to sound composed, but she could hear the panic underneath. "We need to talk. This isn't helping either of us. Why are you doing this now?" But it was the last one that finally made her laugh, a short, breathless sound she hadn't made in months. "You're being emotional." The same phrase he'd used to dismiss her from boardrooms. The same phrase he'd whispered in public when she disagreed with him, when she challenged him, when she dared to suggest that her voice mattered just as much as his. Only now, her emotion had started a fire he couldn't put out. Meanwhile, her inbox overflowed. She was being invited to speak on podcasts. Women's leadership forums wanted to hear her story. A non-profit organization reached out, asking if she'd be interested in mentoring young female entrepreneurs. And deep inside, something began to shift, not pride, but presence. She no longer felt like a ghost in her own life. Still, the attention came with pressure. Some accused her of bitterness, of seeking revenge, of trying to destroy her husband's career. But that's the thing about truth, it makes people uncomfortable. When they've built comfort on silence, she stayed grounded. Not once did she retaliate. Not once did she release private information or accuse Ezra beyond what the documents already showed. And that grace, that calm was more powerful than any scandal. 3 days after the story broke, Amelia walked into Roadstack for the first time in over a year. She wasn't there to argue. She had no lawsuit in her hand. But she had something far more disarming: clarity. The receptionist, a young woman named Jess, stood when she saw her. "Mrs. Rhodes," she said softly, I've been following everything. I just want you to know, you're inspiring a lot of us." Amelia nodded. "Thank you, but I'm not here to inspire. I'm here to remember who I am." Upstairs, Ezra was waiting. He looked tired, less polished than usual, and for a brief moment, Amelia saw not the man who had hurt her, but the man she once believed in, the man who used to share ideas with her at midnight over takeout and laugh when they dreamed about what they'd name their future app. But that man had made choices, and choices have echoes. You've made your point, Ezra said, trying to keep his tone level. I haven't made a point, Amelia replied. I've told the truth. He opened his mouth, but she stopped him. Not here to ruin you, Ezra. I'm here to reclaim me. And with that, she slid a folder across the table. Inside was a proposal. Not for money, not for status, for equity, for rightful ownership, for public acknowledgement of her contribution, not as a favor, but as a fact. You can either stand with the truth, she said calmly, or continue to run from it. But I promise you, one of us will walk away from this with dignity. For the first time, he didn't know what to say, because this wasn't the woman he'd grown used to dismissing. This was Amelia Rhodes, confident, composed, and finally visible. And the world wasn't just watching now, it was listening. The contract sat untouched on the conference table, as if even paper knew this moment carried weight far beyond ink and signatures. Ezra stared at it like it might explode. Amelia, on the other hand, looked calm, not because she wasn't afraid, but because she was finally choosing herself over comfort, over fear, over history. Outside the glass walls of the boardroom, employees stole glances. Some pretended to type, others paused mid-call just to catch a glimpse of her. Many of them had only heard her name in passing, and some hadn't heard it at all. Yet there she stood, composed, clear-eyed, not seeking attention but commanding it without saying a word. Ezra finally spoke. You're doing this publicly, so I have no choice. Amelia tilted her head, almost sadly. You've always had a choice. You just never imagined I'd have one too. There was no anger in her voice, no trace of revenge. That's what made it sting more. Ezra knew she wasn't out to destroy him. She was simply finished being erased. He tried again. No, I didn't build this alone. I never said I did. She raised a brow. You didn't have to say it. You just made sure no one else ever said my name. The silence stretched between them, not awkward as wreck. Ezra reached for the pen, but his hand paused. What happens after this? I move forward, she said gently, and so can you, but this time, the truth comes with us. She left the office with no dramatic exit, no cameras waiting, just a quiet walk through the same lobby where she'd once sat helping design the company's first logo, where she'd waited hours with coffee and printouts, while Ezra made promises he'd later forget. But this time, she didn't look back. The following days unfolded like a rising tide. One by one, people came forward, former assistants, interns, junior developers sharing stories about Amelia that had long been tucked away. How she stayed late to help with proposals, how she championed the voices of others, how she remembered birthdays and names and treated every small role like it mattered. It wasn't just a redemption arc. It was a revelation. Podcasts called it the Amelia effect. Young women in tech started quoting her words from the article in job interviews. A university invited her to speak at their entrepreneurship summit, and for the first time, she stood on a stage, not behind anyone, but in front. Still, there were nights when it all felt overwhelming. Alone in her apartment, she sometimes questioned if she was strong enough to keep going. The world's applause is loud, but so is its scrutiny. Every headline praising her came with another one questioning her motives. But in those moments, Amelia did something she hadn't done in years. She opened her old notebook, the one she kept when she and Ezra were just starting out. It was full of scribbled ideas, doodles, and late-night to-do lists, none of which bore his name. They were hers, all hers, and somewhere between those pages, she remembered something powerful. She had always been enough. She had always had vision. The only thing missing was someone to believe in it. Now, that someone was her. Across the city, Ezra faced a different storm. Board members questioned his judgment. Shareholders whispered about his ethics. The glamorous image he had built, so carefully polished, began to blur under the light of exposure. Not because of scandal, but because truth has a way of dimming anything built on pretense. And deep down, he knew the woman he had once called too sensitive, too soft, had built something far stronger than a brand. She had built her name, brick by brick, word by word, truth by truth, and she wasn't done yet. The rain poured hard that evening, tapping like fingertips against Amelia's window, as if the world itself was trying to say, "You've come this far, don't stop now." She sat in her small but warm apartment, surrounded not by luxury but by peace. and for the first time in a long while, she felt something return to her bones: certainty. That morning, she had received a formal invitation to the annual Founders Summit in San Francisco, a gathering of the top 100 entrepreneurs in the country. It wasn't just a panel slot or a side-stage speaking gig. It was the keynote. Her name, Amelia Rhodes, was printed at the top of the program. Not Mrs. Ezra Rhodes, not co-founder of Just Her. Finally, and yet, the closer the date came, the more the weight of it pressed on her. What could she say in front of the world that wouldn't just echo the noise, but cut through it? What truth could she share that hadn't already been whispered or typed or quoted? Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A text, unexpected, from Ezra. I know I don't deserve your time, but I hope you'll hear me out before the summit. I owe you that. She stared at the message for a long while. Months ago, she might have deleted it. Weeks ago, she might have wept. But now, she was curious. The next day, they met at a small, quiet cafe, tucked off a tree-lined street they used to walk when they were still building dreams instead of defenses. Ezra looked older, not tired-stripped. He didn't speak right away, and for once, she didn't rush to fill the silence. Finally, he said, I didn't lose you at that gala, Amelia. I started losing you the moment I stopped seeing you. Her jaw tightened, but she let him continue. I was so consumed with proving we belonged at those tables that I forgot who helped build them. I thought success meant pushing forward even if it meant pushing you aside. She didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. Ezra pulled out an envelope, not a legal one. No threats, no proposals. Inside was a letter, handwritten, his signature. At the bottom, a public statement, a confession. He was offering to publish it before the summit, on the Rhodestech website, and in every major business outlet. Not to save face, but to tell the truth, fully, with her name finally printed alongside the history they'd both lived. Amelia took the envelope, weighed it in her hand, then looked him in the eye. I don't need your permission anymore, she said softly, but I appreciate your courage. He nodded. It's late, but I hope it's not too late. She left the cafe feeling lighter, but not because Ezra had redeemed himself. She wasn't waiting for that anymore. She was simply ready to let go of the chapter that had tried to close her inside it. 3 days later, she stood on stage at the Founders Summit. Cameras flashed. The crowd rose to their feet before she even spoke a word. But the applause didn't move her the way one quiet moment did when she looked into the crowd and saw a young woman in the front row, holding a worn notebook that looked a lot like the one Amelia used to carry. Amelia leaned into the microphone and began. I used to think my voice didn't matter unless someone else handed me the mic. I don't believe that anymore. Her speech didn't mention Ezra, not once. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about revenge or reclaiming stolen credit. It was about what happens when you stop waiting for someone to name your worth and start naming it yourself. She ended with this. Some of us were taught to be quiet, to support from the sidelines, to be proud of others and small for ourselves. But we are not shadows. We are the light that makes things grow. And I hope if you're watching this wherever you are, you'll stop asking for permission to be who you already are. The room exploded with applause. But more than that, emails flooded in afterward, thousands of them, from people who finally felt seen, from forgotten partners, overlooked co-founders, abandoned spouses, undervalued employees. Her story had become more than hers. It was theirs. Asterisk. The summit speech went viral within hours, not because Amelia Rhodes was famous, but because she had spoken the words so many people never had the courage, or the space, or the power to say. Her quiet strength, her unwavering honesty, and the way she carried dignity like it was her birthright touched something universal. But the real magic didn't happen on stage. It began in the days that followed, far from cameras, far from applause, in real offices, real homes, real lives. A small tech startup in Austin began rewriting its founding documents to properly credit its silent co-founder, a brilliant Latina engineer who'd always worked behind the scenes. A retired teacher in Maine wrote a viral post about her late husband, revealing she had written most of the lectures he had become nationally known for. It was never about fame, she wrote. It was about being remembered. An artist in Johannesburg left her studio for the first time in years and hosted a gallery exhibit titled The Woman Behind the Curtain. Every painting told the story of someone whose genius had gone unseen. Amelia's story was painted on a wall of light. These ripples had names, faces, and stories, and They were no longer silent. Amelia, meanwhile, didn't return to her old life. She didn't want to. Something deeper had awakened in her, something even she hadn't anticipated, purpose beyond her past. She began mentoring, hosting quiet gatherings in her home for women, with ideas and no backing. She created an online platform called Second Light, a digital sanctuary for those rebuilding after being erased. No ad campaigns, no hype, just word of mouth and deep, slow trust. And it worked. Within a year, Second Light had supported over 300 venture small businesses, non-profit initiatives, artistic collaborations, all launched by people who had been told no, one too many times. But even as her new path unfolded, life wasn't without complexity. One afternoon, months after the summit, Amelia found herself sitting at a park bench, watching the wind sweep golden leaves across the path. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ezra. "I've stepped down as CEO. The board voted unanimously. I'm moving into a quieter chapter, maybe one I should have chosen a long time ago. I hope your new journey is everything you dreamed it would be. I mean that." She didn't reply immediately. She sat there with the message, letting it settle, not with bitterness, but with clarity. He had finally done what she used to beg him to do. Pause. And now, she didn't need anything from him. Not approval, not closure, not even acknowledgement. She had given those things to herself. A soft voice pulled her attention away. "Excuse me." A young girl, maybe 19, stood beside the bench, nervously holding a book. "I recognized you from the summit video. I hope this isn't weird, but could you sign this?" she asked, holding out a dog-eared copy of Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. "It's not your book," she added quickly, "but your story gave me the courage to apply for a business grant, and I got it." Amelia smiled, taking the book gently. "It's not weird," she said. "It's the whole reason I spoke in the first place." She signed the inside cover, not just her name, but a message. "Never let someone else hold the pen to your story." Amelia, as the girl left, Amelia leaned back, breathing in the crisp, honest air. She didn't know what would come next, and for once, that thrilled her, because her story no longer hinged on someone else's choices. She had become the author of her own life, and that was the most powerful rewrite of all.